Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. And today is a show that is for the listeners. So hopefully you are listening. Basically, today is a Michigan Monday mailbag full of your questions that we solicited after the Maryland game. And these came in. And Tom, the mood of the questions were not necessarily happy or light or tailored to the Ohio State offense.
No, if you don't like this show, you only have yourselves to blame. If you think that we're being too negative, you only have yourselves to blame. We are working with the material we've been given, and there was not a lot of optimism for a team that is 10-1. And as we know, the best part about being 10-1
is the opportunity to go 11-1.
That's right.
A lot of the questions are basically like, where should Michigan bury the bodies? And like, just stuff like that. After seeing Michigan struggle against Indiana a little bit, though, wouldn't you think there's more hope than previously believed?
Yeah, I think that this is going to be a really fun week where Ohio State fans are convinced their team's going to get murdered and rolled up inside a carpet and dumped off a bridge. And Michigan fans are going to be convinced, because they looked like crap for long stretches of the game against Indiana, Michigan fans are going to be convinced that their team is going to blow it, because they always blow it and they never beat Ohio State. And that's going to be the mentality of Michigan fans. Everyone's going to be miserable. That's why this is such a great week.
It's the happiest week of the year because everybody is so dang miserable. So I guess we should just get right to the misery. We want to start getting with the questions.
First one from Alameda Buck. How badly will Michigan's tight ends abuse Ohio State's linebackers?
There's a lot of questions like this. Ohio State really hasn't suffered much to the tight ends. Maryland, I don't even know if they have a tight end on the roster, but they've done well recently. Michigan State didn't, although they don't have a quarterback who could have thrown the ball and taken advantage of them. But Michigan clearly does. They target the tight ends. They're going to put the Ohio State linebackers in stressful situations. And, I mean, that was one of the matchups earlier in the year where we thought Michigan had a pretty good advantage. And since that point, the entire Wolverine offense has gotten better. So that, the tight end situation is still the same as it was for Michigan, but maybe even better now because there are other players the Ohio State offense has to worry about.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily need to worry about the tight ends abusing Ohio State's linebackers as much as everyone abusing Ohio State's linebackers. That's probably when you throw your head back and sigh. Does that mean I'm right, or does that mean that we're trying to be more positive? I don't know.
The linebackers are equal opportunity abusees. That is true. Not to blame the victims here.
Not to blame the victims. No,
we do not believe in that.
It is certainly. I think there are going to be opportunities for Michigan to try and exploit some of the issues that we've seen all season with the Ohio State linebackers, and I think that they will probably. I mean, that is a unit that they are going to try and put in bad situations to take advantage of what you've seen other teams take advantage of this year. And a lot of times that's been, I mean, you've seen it this year with running backs. You saw it on Saturday with a running back, but you've seen it with little screen passes, little get a guy out in the flat and just get him in space and make a guy miss and they go. There's lots of ways that if nothing changes, then you're going to see a lot more of the same of that on Saturday, I think.
Yeah, and just be prepared to see the same thing you see every time Ohio State and Michigan play, which is the play-action bootleg to a wide-open tight end for like 27 yards, and you just get furious about it. Just accept it, make friends with it. That way, when it happens, I'm sure it won't make you so mad.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, this definitely seems like, of all the weeks for people to take things in stride and even-keeled, this, I think, is probably right at the top of that list of when it's definitely going to happen.
I agree. What's next?
All right, next one. This is from Mr. Educator, at Mr. Educator on Twitter.
That's my teacher's name back in school.
I want to believe that it'll be different, but I can't convince myself that anything will change. Please convince me that OSU's defense has performed best against offenses similar to Michigan's, and that Urban and the Buckeyes will set the world right again by making Michigan sad. They have performed well against offenses similar to Michigan in that they performed best against an offense from the state of Michigan. So, I mean, that's something to be optimistic about.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that your football stat nerds probably don't talk about, is the geographical basis of offenses. So, yeah, you're right. With the whole state of Michigan thing, I bet they would shut down Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan. I don't know about Western Michigan. But the one thing that Michigan does is they will, a lot of the time, they'll just come straight at you, which is where Ohio State is best suited. So there will be more plays that Michigan will basically like give up on, like not give up on, but they're going to run right into Ohio State. They're going to do what Ohio State wants. And that helps Ohio State, provided that they can stop those. Whereas you see Maryland doing what they did on Saturday, or other schools doing what they do. Michigan is willing to just pound and pound at times, which will help the Ohio State defense absorb those blows and maybe get some stops, which they will need because there's only so many points that the Michigan defense will allow.
When you mentioned stops, this was the first weekend I'd ever watched Ohio State football, so I don't know what a stop is in a defensive context. Can you explain that?
Good question. A stop is when a defense allows a touchdown in one play, and then they stop playing defense, and then the ball goes back to the offense.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
To the point of the question, if you're looking for something to feel optimistic about with regard to the Maryland offense as compared to the Michigan offense, they are somewhat different stylistically, what they try and do, how they try and do it. Greg Schiano, after the game on Saturday, said he's not going to spend a lot of time on the Maryland game because it's different from what we're going to see. And when I get on that bus, I'm going to start looking at the team up north, and got 6 days to get ready for that. Get ready for what we've been able to, and they've been able to make one of the biggest games in college football this year. So, he's basically saying there aren't necessarily a ton of lessons to learn from the Maryland game because there's not a lot of overlap there. I mean, it's going to look somewhat similar. I mean, they're trying to do some of the same things, but they do them in kind of a different way, and they don't use shifts and motion the way that Maryland did today, which on Saturday, which I think really threw. I mean, that seemed like that was what put the Ohio State defense in a bad spot a lot.
Plus, you don't want to watch videos of your family being axe-murdered. So you're not gonna want to watch that on the bus, on the plane. You're gonna want to watch anything different. Puppies being drowned, something more peaceful, I guess.
We got dark real quick.
Hey, the listeners, the questions started it. We're just following down that hole.
All right, next one from @_BillWare_. I will be drinking before the game next week. Should I drink beer, hard liquor, or bleach?
Yes.
Next one from @JustinH4LE. After the first quarter is over, should Ohio State use all 3 of their timeouts and take a couple delay of game penalties to discuss their halftime adjustments earlier in the game? Parentheses, I say sarcastically. We discussed this a little bit after the game in the show that we released on Sunday. It is a little mystifying that it takes halftime for Ohio State to make adjustments to things that are not major adjustments on defense. They got gashed repeatedly on the same play, basically, multiple times in the first half on Saturday against Maryland. And then after halftime, they came out and they had figured it out and they stopped getting gashed on it. You are not required by law to wait until halftime to fix your issues. So I would certainly think that they have to know that they don't have the luxury of screwing around and waiting for halftime against Michigan. Because if you fall behind against Michigan and you give up 2-3 big touchdowns against Michigan, it's going to be a lot harder to make those points up against that defense than it was against Maryland.
Let me ask you this, because Urban Meyer says it's hard to see stuff from ground level, from the field level. Greg Schiano is down on the field. defensive coordinator, can't see necessarily what needs to be changed. He needs to rely on the guys upstairs to tell him that. That being what Bill Davis is up there. Alex Grinch, is he down? He's on the field.
I saw Alex Grinch on the field today. So yeah.
So is he not getting what he needs from the guys above? And then do you have to wait until you get back into the locker room to discuss it? Maryland was able to make adjustments on the fly after that third quarter, I assume, because they performed well. There's going to be situations with the Michigan game where Ohio State will go with their opening script, and then eventually they'll have to change from that on offense. But defensively, when Michigan does what they always do with the tight ends and stuff, you would think that your plan, you should know what Michigan is going to do. And so maybe there won't need to be as many adjustments. But you also know, because we hear it every week, that, well, they hadn't shown this all year, or they did something they haven't done all year. And do you expect Michigan to be holding something back? We talked earlier today about the double pass with tight end Zach Gentry, who used to be a quarterback. The legend is, or like the assumption is, that there's always something being held back for this game. Michigan has to be holding something back.
Right, and Michigan has had a month that has allowed them lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of time to prepare for the Ohio State game. Because while Ohio State was playing at Michigan State and had to go pretty hard to prepare for that, and was prepping special things just for that game, Michigan was playing Rutgers 2 weeks ago, and then Indiana at home. And back-to-back road games are against better competition, do not allow you that luxury. This is one of the reasons why the SEC plays that SEC SoCon Challenge weekend. You have time you basically have 2 weeks to prep for your rivalry game, because you don't have to worry about the team you're playing the week before. Ohio State had to worry about the team they played 2 weeks ago. Ohio State, I don't know if they felt they needed to worry about the Maryland game, but they ended up worrying about it. So Michigan has had a little extra time to get more stuff saved up, and I think you're going to see stuff that they have not run at all this year, and stuff that they have probably been setting up. Because what you try and do is you have quality control coaches who are in charge of keeping an eye on your tendencies, your opponent's tendencies. So if your team is in a certain formation or a certain personnel package, and they run the ball 85% of the time out of that personnel package, you might be, when in your self-scouting, recognize that, and then do something that's the opposite of that, because the opponent knows that you do whatever you do, and you're going to do something else. It's the I know that I know thing. You're sort of setting them up and then doing something different in that big moment. Go back to the TCU game. Dwayne Haskins handed off. But when Ohio State needed a touchdown late in that game, for the first time, he kept it, and then he scored it, and then he just walked into the end zone, because they had set that up and set that up and set that up. But when they really needed it, they had it, and they played that card. All right. Next one from Mark: is the injury to Terry McLaurin anything serious? We will need him.
Yeah, Urban said he expects him to be. He's probable. He said after the game. What was the extent of the injury? What did he?
I don't know that we actually heard.
Yeah, he didn't seem concerned, and you saw there was a drop off when he was out, as you would expect in every facet. So they definitely need him. You can't lose Austin Mack and Terry McLaurin and just expect to just continue to be level. And we've seen they've dropped without Austin Mack out there. They would definitely drop without Terry McLaurin, not just at receiver, but also in gunner, downing the punts, getting down there to stop Donovan Peoples-Jones, which is going to be another facet of the game. So that would be a big loss, but it sounds like it won't be a loss, although we didn't even know Mike Weber was injured until after the game today.
Right. Yeah. Even
Saturday.
Even during the game, we were told no, they weren't aware of any injuries, and then after the game, Urban said, actually. So basically, the short version of the injury update is they anticipate that McLaurin will play, Weber will play. Baron Browning sounded like he was probable to come back.
Yeah. Remember, this is Terry McLaurin's senior day.
Yeah.
Against Michigan. He would have to be like missing a lower limb at this point. Like you mentioned after the Maryland game, a John Simon situation where his knee doubled in size basically, and he couldn't play on it.
All right, next one from @Sedavadova. How brilliant is Shiano for not unveiling the defense before the game? I mean, this is a very smooth transition from that last. Wait till the big twist will be Ohio State comes out against Michigan on Saturday and has a defense.
You'll never see it. You never expect it to come. You know what? At this point, the big Michigan wrinkle may be tackling and discipline and being in the right place, filling the right gaps, crazy stuff. You got to pull out all of the stops in a Michigan game. And if you have to do something crazy like tackle and fill your run fits, anything you could pull out of the toolbox, you got to do in a game like this.
Yeah, you got to break it all out. This is you wait all year for this game, and then pow, defense. Harbaugh won't see it coming.
Yeah. It's time for war, as they say in the WAC right now.
As they say. If you're wondering what he's talking about there, if you have not, maybe you haven't heard us talk about this before, but the week of the Michigan game, every year, they just play the song "It's Time for War" over and over and over and over and over.
By LL Cool J. You can check it out on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. And if you want to put yourself in the mind of Buckeyes right now, just leave it on like 24/7. Leave it on while you're at work, in your cubicle, in your fancy office, whatever. Corner office overlooking the city, and just have that blaring. You know what? If you're such a bigwig, you could have it playing over the PA like the Muzak. I think that would be the best. That way you can really get into the feel. And even Thursday when you're with your family, put it on the stereo.
Go in if your mom has the Pandora Christmas station on or something. Turn it off and just loop that. Really set the mood. Really set the mood for the holidays. All right, next one from @D_Bowman10. How many defensive coaches will still be stealing money next week? Thanks. Now, does that mean...
That's all you, Tom.
Yeah, this is... Remember when I said that Gerd lets me answer the ones where we can get ourselves in trouble? I assume the question is how many defensive coaches will still be there, because I can answer that question very easily. Mm-hmm. They'll all be there next week. They'll all be there for the bowl game. You'll probably see some changes after the season, but it's that you're not going to see any kind of dramatic shakeups between now and the Michigan game for sure.
Over under after the season on defensive coaching changes is 1.5.
Over.
We'll talk about it later.
Okay. Next one from Langdon Auger. Hate that guy. Over under on Dobbins and Weber rushing is 117.5 yards.
What do you think about that, Tom?
That's a good question. 117.5. I think you're probably going to see them end up in between 3 and 4 yards per carry. So that means you're probably in the neighborhood of 35 rushes. I'll take the over there. Because I think that they're going to have to run the ball, and they know that they have to run the ball, both because you always have to run the ball to beat Michigan, but also if the defense is shaky, you want to keep the defense off the field. You don't want to have quick 3 and outs. You don't want to have the defense going right back out there and getting tired, because that's only going to exacerbate the issues. I think they know they have to run the ball. I think they'll probably be able to stay pretty disciplined. Like, this does not seem like a game where Dwayne Haskins is going to come out and throw it 75 times. They know they have to run it. They're going to stick with the run more than they probably have at other times this season.
Is there a number where you feel good that sounds like a winning number? Like, what's the lowest threshold? Like 175 between the two of them? Does that sound like a win to you? I think that gets pretty close for me.
Yeah, 175 is probably close. If you told me they rushed for 200, I would say they win.
Mm-hmm.
If you told me 150, I mean if they're rushing for 150 yards, it's at least a close game. They're not getting blown out if they're rushing for 150 yards.
One of the things we need to check, because the team that rushes, like, if you rush for 200 yards in this game, I think your record is almost perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So might be something that we have to check out, even though the records at Ohio State online only go back to 1960, which I guess is when time began for us.
They didn't have the internet before 1960, that's
right,
why.
That's true.
All right, next one from @ZippyFish. Would you rather have Everett Withers or Greg Schiano as your defensive coordinator? What kind of coaching shakeups do you expect to see in the offseason, offense and defense?
I think the answer is clearly Greg Schiano, because he's done well, or done better than Everett Withers. And the style of defense that Everett Withers played, I think people, I don't know that they've forgotten how frustrating that was, watching that Orange Bowl and Sammy Watkins, and just the passive offense that everybody hates. And so you go to a more aggressive offense where you feel, I guess, better because you're not just allowing easy passes, but then sometimes you're allowing easy home runs based on the aggression. But it was better under Chris Ash. I think we would agree up with that. So the aggressive defense can work. Greg Schiano has done, I don't think he was terrible last year. I mean, there was issues, but at that point we were thinking it was the linebackers. It was Bill Davis. What is it now? I think Greg Schiano is definitely not an innocent party in any of this. The defense that he has now is not working, so he either needs to go back to what Chris Ash was doing, run the quarters, or it's just time for him to go, because if this was Everett Withers instead of one of Urban Meyer's best friends, it would be totally unacceptable.
Right. And Schiano came in with a reputation as a great defensive mind, and I think everyone came in thinking, oh, this is a home run hire. And they gave up 55 points to Iowa last year. They gave up 49 points to Purdue this year. They gave up 51 points to Maryland this year. Those are numbers that would have been absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah.
You go back through Ohio State defense prior to last year, prior to 2017. How many 50-point games can you remember? I mean, off the top of my head, the only thing that jumps to mind is the Penn State game in '94, which is a 63-point game.
Yeah.
I cannot remember them giving up 50 points in a game other than that, just off the top of my head. I'm sure it happened at some point, but it's just not coming to mind.
Even what we think back to terrible defenses like Mark Snyder's defense in 2004 was better than this. You look at the defenses back then, and you have Jim Tressel's ball control style, which helped. But if they held teams to those numbers now, I think people would be like, this is pretty good, because you've seen so many bad defenses at Ohio State. The 2012, 2013 they were allowing in the 23, 24 points a game those seasons. Those numbers came down, but if Greg Schiano can't fix it, then you have to fix Greg Schiano. I mean, you either have to tell him what you want or get somebody else to produce it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things with the points that is worth mentioning. Well, first of all, Dwayne Haskins threw a touchdown to Purdue, and Dwayne Haskins threw a touchdown to Maryland. So 7 of those points you can take off of Schiano's record if you want to. And the point about the Jim Tressel offense, ball control offense, is a good one, because when you're scoring more, when you're throwing the ball more, when you're going tempo, you're giving the opponent more possessions, which gives the opponent more chances to score. Now, ideally, you're not letting the opponent go 80 yards on 2 plays every time they get the ball. That's still an issue. Not all of this is excused, but that's some context that's worth at least thinking about while you're while you're having the discussion. I mean, the points, I use the points, and that's kind of the good top line number just to sort of give you a sense for it. But there is a little bit of nuance there that you have to at least keep in mind while you're yelling angry things at your TV.
And drinking your bleach.
All right, next one from at AJ Borland. If you could take one player from Michigan's roster and add them immediately to OSU's lineup, would you take Devin Bush or some other incorrect answer?
We were talking about this in the car on the drive from the Maryland game to the secluded location we are now in Pennsylvania. And you try to make a counter to the Devin Bush at middle linebacker. And, Ben Bredesen at guard was one of the names. Who else? Maybe one of the corners. But really, those are secondary, second place to Devin Bush, who is an All-American at a position that Ohio State desperately would welcome him. Well, I don't know if they would welcome him, but he would be a good addition, at least in the fans' eyes. But I always go back to is who's going to be coaching him at Ohio State and who's going to be putting him in positions to produce. Because Ohio State has plenty of talented linebackers, but they haven't grown. They haven't been put in a position to make the proper plays. And then also when they are in position to make plays, they're not getting it done. So I think it was Urban or said it's personnel and it's coaching. But ultimately, it's about getting the players in the right positions to make the plays. And if they don't make the plays, then you have to change the personnel. But nothing has changed. We saw Keandre Jones out there a little bit against Maryland, but there's no changes coming, not this late in the season. And apparently there never were, because the guys behind the starters weren't ever prepared to play or good enough to play. They rarely rotated in. It was just Baron Browning and Dante Booker. And Dante Booker didn't really do much against Maryland. And it's pretty disappointing that there aren't more guys pushing for action. And if they are, then why aren't they playing?
Why aren't they playing is a good question, because I think when you look at the safety spot, obviously the defense is not fixed. I think that's probably safe to say, but the defense did look better for a few weeks with Brendan White in there. Brendan White was only in there because Jordan Fuller got a questionable targeting call. If the officials had not ruled that targeting, I don't know if Brendan White is starting right now, because I don't know if they would be willing to swap someone in, because we have heard a couple times, a couple different versions of this from the coaching staff. It's either you don't want to change this, this far into the season, it's too late to make a, substantial personnel changes, or we don't want to, you've got to just ride it out and stay consistent. You can't keep shuffling guys in and out. That's something Urban Meyer said a week or two ago. I think there is a very compelling case to be made that the offensive line is not going to get materially better right now without personnel changes. It is what it is at this point. You've got a couple seniors in there that have not been performing to the level that you would probably need to get to a college football playoff kind of area. And they were not willing to swap those guys out. I mean, Urban has said, well, Wyatt Davis is close. Wyatt Davis would be the next guy in. Well, you do not see Wyatt Davis starting. He's talked about it for a couple weeks. Wyatt Davis is still not starting. Brendan Bowen has been back for a couple weeks now. He was dressed and going through warm-ups at Michigan State. He was dressed going through warm-ups at Maryland. He's still not starting. You have other guys you can put in there, and they haven't done it. So that's I think another sign of just, I mean, there's just some stubbornness there, I think.
Yeah, there's these coaching adages that he just latches onto, even like the Maryland game late, not letting Maryland score, or not thinking about letting Maryland score. Something that older coaches, they just won't do. They stick to their guns. And you've got a guy like Malcolm Pridgeon who has had a rough month at the very least. And you've got a young guy like Wyatt Davis coming on. You've got Brandon Bowen back. I think you could put Brandon Bowen and Wyatt Davis both in at left guard and right guard. And I don't think they're going to be any worse. And there's a possibility that they would be better.
Yeah, I think you really had to give it a try at some point because it was not getting better. If anything, if it was trending in any direction, it was trending the wrong direction. So I think there probably was a pretty compelling case that you need to try something else on the offensive line. I think there's a decent case that how much worse could the linebacking play get, really? Maybe it's a coaching issue, in which case swapping out a guy won't fix some of the issues, but maybe that would have been worth looking at a couple weeks ago, because now it's Michigan week, so now you're really, you're not gonna throw someone else in there now. This is not the week to do it. The week to do it was quite a while ago. I mean, we talked about was it after the Penn State game? Or no, it was before the Penn State game, before the Tulane game. After the TCU game, we talked about, hey, they should really try Shaun Wade at safety because you can give him a try against Tulane, see what happens, see what it looks like. No. They're going to stick with Isaiah Pryor. They're going to Jocelyn Wentz still back in the mix, and they waited and they screwed around for another couple weeks, and then they finally, I mean, when it got screamingly obvious that what they were doing was just not working at all, they made a move. But it's like they had to be beaten over the head with it for week after week after week after week, when it seemed very obvious, I think, that was one of many areas where they needed to look at something else.
Well, and that was somebody posted on the forum during the Maryland game, like, Ohio State has 4 touchdowns worth of more talent than Maryland. They should be blowing these guys out. And I'm thinking, where's that talent? I mentioned earlier that there are talented linebackers, and there are all these talented recruits there, but maybe with the linebackers, it's a very low ceiling, and you bring in Keandre Jones or Taraja Mitchell, and they're not going to go above that ceiling because the coaching won't allow it, I think, is my concern at linebacker. And you perfectly described the stubbornness with Shaun Wade, and not that he's been tremendous as a safety. That's not the point. He's been good at nickel, and he's been good at doing what they've been asking him to do. It's just the fact that they talked for weeks about it, and he's getting closer. We're mixing him in. We're doing this. We're doing that, and until it's abundantly clear that what you are doing is not working, then you're like, okay, but you could see it's not working all along. Like, how long must you let it go? And the danger with Michigan coming up is you've let it go on all season long, and now you're going to pay for it.
Right. Now kicking the can down the road. This is they have spent all semester not going to class and not studying, and now it's the week of the final, and it's like, oh crap, hey, the final's coming, and if we don't pass this one, we don't graduate. Well, you may have another semester after next Saturday.
I stopped having those dreams finally, like 4 or 5 years ago. Terrible stuff.
Next one from at Sedovadova. Now that Urban knows that Haskins can run, are you thinking we will see way more QB draws and zone reads against Michigan?
I don't think we'll see way more, because this is a fast Michigan defense, and Dwayne Haskins is not a fast runner. We'll see some, like way more than this week against Maryland. No way. Way more than the rest of the season, where he was carrying it, 2 times in the first 2 games. Yeah, Tom, what would you think of the over/under on rushes, designed or zone read this week? Like 5.5.
I would probably go over that, but I'm looking at his stats from Saturday against Maryland. He had 15 rushes, and he only had, I think, a 3-yard loss. So I think he might have only had 1 sack in there. So that's 14, and you figure, I don't know, even if you figure 5 of those are scrambles, that's 9 that were some kind of a designed something. I mean, there were a few that were pretty clearly just designed quarterback draws. So maybe I know that they probably think that they probably can't. You don't want to put him at risk. You don't want him to get drilled, and because if he gets hurt, then you're really you're really in for Tate Martell time, and then you have a quarterback controversy because you win by 100 points,
and you don't want that.
Yeah, I guess I'd go over 5.5, but if you had told me 24 hours before the Maryland game that I would have said that, I would have said you're crazy. But yeah, that was a very different look from him against Maryland.
Well, how much do you think they did that with an eye towards Michigan this week? Like, let's run Dwayne Haskins like we used to run JT Barrett. That way Michigan has to respect that, and maybe they're a little bit slower against the running backs. And if they aren't, then Dwayne Haskins can pull it and do what he does. But I'm thinking, like, this wasn't just for Maryland, even though at some point they were like, well, we've got to win. And Haskins running it gives us some opportunities because they are not respecting it. And he was able to do some things down in the red zone, 3 touchdowns, which is huge. And for me, like, the Michigan game is going to come down to those short yardage, those red zones. And if they can capitalize, they can win.
Yeah, the opportunity is there, but you have to score. You have to score touchdowns. With your defense looking the way it is, you cannot kick field goals down in the red zone. You can't punt the ball from the 35-yard line. Like, I know it's a wonderful story that Drew Chrisman keeps kicking the ball out of bounds inside the 5, but if you've got the ball in plus territory, in borderline field goal range, you got to get points. You can't play cutesy field position like that. That was Tressel ball, but Jim Tressel had good defenses that he could lean on. If you're going to give up 51 points to Maryland, that is not a winning strategy, because Michigan's going to put up a bunch of points. You're not going to win this game 17-13. So you gotta play to win. And I think that the fact that it has worked out so well in terms of field position in the past, he's probably going to be inclined to try and do that again, which is, I will, I'm sure, be going insane in the press box. But that's my philosophical objection to what they do. But it's worked out so far.
After that Michigan State game, Urban was asked if that was the best punting performance he's ever had, and he's like, "Yeah, I think so." Why would you try to capture that again? It's like, it's very unlikely that you're going to have your 2 best punting performances in the span of a month. At some point, you have to be more aggressive and keep the ball, especially if you've taken the ball from your 20 to the Michigan 35, and you've got 3 or 4 more yards to go, and you're not going to attempt to continue to move the ball. You are asking to lose because you are not asking and trying to win.
Right. You can't coach scared. That was the annual lesson of John Cooper. You cannot coach scared in the Michigan game. Got to play to win, and if you don't win, that's fine. Go down guns blazing. Don't try and punt your way to success. Next one from @BPile72. Will Corso put on the Brutus head next week?
No way.
Yeah, I don't think so. Game day, I'm sure if you care enough to be listening to us, I'm sure are aware game day is coming to Columbus. I was thinking about this. As soon as I heard that, I immediately thought, you're going to see that graphic where they have that pick, and it's just going to be all block M's all the way across, because Desmond's going to pick them. I would certainly think that Corso will pick them. Herb Street will get angry Ohio State fans in his mentions no matter what he does, but I think that with as bad as Ohio State looked against Maryland, and the narrative that this is the year for Harbaugh and they're finally favored, it seems like you're going to get everyone on that show picking Michigan.
What does he do when he picks Michigan? Because they don't have a mascot headgear.
He'll probably put on the helmet, I would guess.
Oh, there you go. I expect, I don't know if, here's how you know what ESPN is thinking. If Herbstreit doesn't have his kids out there with him on the stage, then they have like no thought of Ohio State winning. But if they're out there, then you also have Corso, who likes to taunt people, and he knows these kids. He'll probably, would love to taunt them with the Michigan helmet, put that on, and it'll be a grand time. And there's no, I just 10% chance that he puts the Brutus head on.
Last one from Crabapple Buck. Ohio State will have to outscore them in a shootout. How far behind can Ohio State get before a comeback is out of range? They've been plagued with slow starts and poor defense until halftime when they finally make adjustments. Can they hang in down a few scores?
What was it? Was it 14-3 last year? Or was it 14-0?
It was 14. I think it was either 14-0 or 14-3 because then Josh Metellus had that interception that he just. I mean, that game. Michigan almost had that game locked up last year because Ohio State was down either 14-0 or 14-3, down inside the red zone, and JT Barrett just hit Josh Metellus right between the numbers on what probably should have been a pick six, and he dropped it. And so instead of 21-0 Michigan or 21-3 Michigan, all of a sudden Ohio State went in and scored a touchdown a play or two later, and it's a one-score game, and you could feel the air just sucked out of that building. And that's what one of the things that Ohio State has going for it on Saturday is you have Michigan players, Michigan coaches, and Michigan fans who literally for a generation have just had they're just waiting for the roof to fall in every year because they know, yes, okay, Michigan's beating Ohio State right now, but Michigan never actually beats Ohio State. So how is this going to go wrong this time? If you're an Ohio State fan of a certain age, you remember what that feeling is like in this week. 96 game, Ohio State just marching up and down the field and just kicking field goals in the first half, and it just everyone in that stadium was going, this is not good, they need to be scoring touchdowns. And you had one play where Sean Springs slips, Ty Streets goes a million yards, and Ohio State's still winning 9-7, but everyone in the building went, oh, no, I know how this ends. And it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point.
Yeah, 95, 96, 97. This is where Michigan, their mentality is right now. Michigan fans, you will probably be able to hear the nervousness. But in terms of like how far they can get behind, I'm always thinking like if you stay within 14, because that's just two possessions. That's what they were against Maryland, and they never Maryland had opportunities to go up 3 scores, and that's when you start to feel like this is too much to overcome. And it's rare to come back from 3 scores. 2 scores is not, that's pretty standard. I think if they get down more than 14, then I'm not liking their chances. Being down 14, I don't think, they've been there before this season, last season. So that's not too difficult. And you always have the opportunity, if you defer the kickoff, you get the ball in the second half. So you've got an opportunity to score at the end of the first half generally, and then if you get the ball in the second half, there's your 14 points right there. So there are ways to get back from two touchdowns. When you start talking 17, now that's a little bit further, and if you get down more than that, this is a team that we saw quit against Purdue. Will they quit on senior day? I think if they get blown out, it won't necessarily be because they quit. They're just not good enough to not get blown out.
Yeah, if you go back, I think you've got the point differential about right, because I just went back and double-checked the numbers from the Penn State game last year. They were down 21-3 and 28-10, so down 18 points twice, and that's right on that cusp. But they did exactly what you just said. They scored before halftime. They scored on Mike Weber's run to make it 28-17 before halftime. Got the ball after the half, cut it to 28-20. All of a sudden, it's a one-score game again. So if you can just stay within striking distance, within 2 scores, I think you're okay. They fell down 2 scores against Michigan in 2016 too. That's not a disaster. It's not great. Try not to do that. Free advice, try not to fall down multiple scores. Yeah, it has worked in the past, but try not to do that. But that would be a concern. If it if it turns into a 21-point game, or if they fall down 28-7 in the second quarter, Urban Meyer's teams have not necessarily responded well to adversity in the past. Sometimes they do. Some of them have. I mean, you go back to the Alabama game. It looked like they were going to get blown off the field by Alabama, and you're down 21-6, and then you come back and win. And that's Alabama.
Yeah, so again, that's 2 scores.
Yeah, it's 2 scores, but they have done it in the past, but the last couple of years, when they got down to Iowa, it spiraled in the fourth quarter. When they got down to Purdue, it spiraled in the fourth quarter. Ohio State's playoff discussion looks a lot different if they don't have that pick 6 and that last just horrendous, just blown tackle against Purdue. If that's 35-20, that's a very different conversation than 49-20.
Yeah, and now their playoff talk it's obsolete. Even if they beat Michigan, they win the Big Ten championship, the playoff talk is about giving up 50 points to Maryland, 49 to Purdue, and maybe try again next year because we don't need you in the playoffs this year with that kind of defense. So that's why you wonder, would it be better for Urban to tell his team that? Like, hey guys, we're not going to the playoffs. This Michigan game is our playoffs. This is our championship game. And whatever happens after that is fine. But this is our title game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that realistically, he's not talking playoffs one way or the other. He's probably talking about Big Ten championship game, and that being, that's the next goal. The first goal is to win the game, then you win the division, then you go to the Big Ten championship game, then you win the Big Ten, and then whatever happens after that happens. I mean, that's kind of how they look at it, at least how they say they look at it. When they have the schedule posted on the wall in the WAC, they have the Rose Bowl on there, but they have the college football playoff on there too. So, they are aware of what happens after the Big Ten championship game, but that's how they look at it. And I don't know. I think you shouldn't need to sell anything here. This is the game. This is this is something that they sell in recruiting very hard. If you have ever gone to an Ohio State game, when they're showing the videos pregame, they make a point to sell NFL. You see a lot of talk about Buckeyes in the NFL and the video of all the Buckeyes getting drafted, and then you see the video of the Michigan game. And that is not there for you to watch. That is there for the recruits who are on the field to watch. And that is something they sell to players from the first time they talk to them when they're in high school. And that is a huge part of being part of the Ohio State program. So you would think you would not have to sell Saturday too hard.
J.K. Dobbins, after the Maryland game, was asked about the Michigan game, and his response was, "This is why I left Texas, to come play in that game." So that's something they talk about in recruiting. They talk about it every day, and it's here. It's Michigan week, and there really does need to be like an extra Sirius station, like Sirius XM. There needs to be like a Michigan week music station, like every year. It was just the dead Schembechlers on a loop constantly, or maybe throw in some Tibidal and things like that. But I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we do. It's my favorite week of the year, even though it's hard. It's a lot of work. It's time consuming, but it's always worth it. Almost. There are some years where it is not worth it.
This year, this is another year where this is the classic Ohio State Michigan. The Big Ten, your Big Ten title hopes ride on this game. Either team can still win the Big Ten coming to the last game of the regular season. I'll have to look up the stat. At one point I looked it up, years ago, and it was from 1968 until 2000, this game had played a role in deciding the Big Ten champion in all but 5 or 6 years. It's very unusual when both teams are out of the race for for the Big Ten title when this game happens, and that's just for a game this late in the season, that is really, really remarkable. Because, I mean, yeah, you can play. Ohio State and Penn State are both in the Big Ten title race when they play. Yeah, but they play in September this year. Like, of course, Illinois was still in the Big Ten title race at that point. Rutgers was probably mathematically eliminated, but everyone else was still in it. So, but to get to Thanksgiving weekend, and every year it means something. Like, not something like, oh, this is for pride, this is for... No, every year there's a championship on the line. You don't need a rivalry trophy. It's the Big Ten championship trophy. It's the rivalry trophy.
Right. So don't dread what you think is going to happen. Embrace the week. Enjoy it. Talk trash to your Michigan fan friends, or for the Michigan fans listening to this show, just be respectful, you jerks. So I think that's going to do it for the show. Thank you for listening. A nice 30-minute show that we had planned that goes almost an hour. So right on schedule. Make sure to check out the rest of the shows on the Ozone Radio Network every day. And we are going to have podcasts, Buckeye Weekly podcasts, essentially every day. That's what we're shooting to do. And this week it's going to be all Michigan. So we are trying to get you ready. Just embrace it, enjoy it, and we will talk to you tomorrow.
Well, she threw away the motel key. I wish it never meant nothing to me. Say it well, now say it well. Oh yeah. Say it well, now say it well. If you tell me that tomorrow's alright, we could steal a car and leave tonight.